Oak Targar friends, hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for another Orc Mode workout. And today was Dynamic Effort Bench Press Day, but just a quick reminder for those of you who watch these, please click like down below. Help keep the likes higher than the dislikes, it would be greatly appreciated. But let's get over to the training. Actually, I had someone complain last night in last week's Dynamic, oh, you shouldn't be using that much band tension and you can't complete the sets. Well, first of all, I was definitely finishing up rehabbing my shoulders. My shoulders just couldn't handle it. They were fatigued from the other training, right? I ran more lockout today. In fact, 35 pounds more band tension with slightly less weight. And it went great. And I think this is more the direction I need to go. We know with my benching, lockouts are my weak link. I have to get more explosive at following through. So I decided to scale the weight way back, and I'm actually running more band tension than I am bar weight. Okay, that is a ton of band. So I'm running 150 pounds of band, for those curious, with only 135 on the bar. Went very, very well, and I feel like I can really work with that. And that is something some of the times they do over at Westside. And in my case, considering my lockout issues and that I am extremely fast off the chest right now, right, even my last close grip PR with the Buffalo bar, I exploded off the chest. It didn't slow to the lockout. I got 352 on a close grip Buffalo. So it's a longer range of motion at the bottom. I have no trouble at the bottom. Okay. Now, we could argue right here, though, the bands are a hair, a little bit of loose. At least one of the bands is at the bottom. That's fine, because I'm getting still the aggressive tension halfway up and through the lockout. And I may mess with adding more and more band tension. That might be interesting to actually experiment with and work with that, because it felt good on my shoulder, because it forced me to really follow through with that tricep, forced me to follow through hard with the tricep. And again, that took some of the stress off the shoulders, and I didn't feel these as much with that extreme delt fatigue. And I think it's because I was able to keep the bar in a better path, forced to follow through triceps. Of course, I've been doing a lot of tricep work too. And we'll get to some of that coming up when we get to the tricep work. Because now my tricep work is no longer going to be just about hypertrophy. It is going to be specializing more and more of what I really need in terms of joint angle specificity, everything to bring my bench up. Now, obviously, my triceps are getting a ton of work because we are doing a lot of extensions, a lot of close grip pressing, everything. They're getting general hypertrophy. So I want all my volume work for them to start getting more and more specific to what I need them to do from a performance perspective. And we'll get to that when we get to it. But I decided I really liked the way that axle bar felt last time. And I don't mean that in a good way, meaning I hated it. But it's like, I know I need the extra grip. I know I need just to get my hands and forearms and everything just tougher in general. Because grip is limiting my deadlift from getting to the 650 plus probably. So we're doing more and more grip work. Let's get that deadlift up. Right, my back and everything and hamstrings and glues, they're all strong enough. We got to keep that grip working. And I feel like this really forces me to do that. Plus, it's so awkward. Like, I only got 3x9 again with this on the close grip with only 230. Okay, that's only 230 pounds, guys, but it's hard and it's awkward. And that's basically everything I do today outside of the heavy band tension speed work. Everything today is going to be axle bar chains. We're getting into all just the awkward stuff for all my supplemental work. But that's good. It felt good. This is very Orc mode. This is keeping with the whole concept of the Orc mode training, right? Nothing but fat bar and chain work for a ridiculous number of sets. By a ridiculous number, we mean something like 26 sets of supplemental lifts today after the speed work. But this is hard. It's hard to balance. It's hard to hold on to. It's hard to keep from rolling. And still, 230 for sets of 9 is decently respectable on close grip, even for me. It's not my best ever with a straight bar. I've hit 250 for 10 with the straight bar before. But we need to get back up to that point. And I want to mess with this bar just a bit. And I'm also going to mess with using that cambered bar eventually too, but that's going to be its own beast. Like benching with that thing, I'm probably going to max on it coming up here soon too. All right, we're going to do a lot more of just the straight weight stuff for the benching. I've got all these different bars I can normal presses with, pin presses with. We're going to use them. We're going to use them all in the max effort rotation because really we know I can explode off the chest. So let's just stick with it. All right, we'll just make sure that that performance element stays there and see if it continues to always be lockout until we can blast through those lockouts. But it doesn't mean we neglect the bottom. That's why we do this work here. This here builds the bottom. The speed work builds the bottom. As long as I get stronger at this stuff, we know we're good off the chest. I try to pause the last rep on these. Try to pause it. But yeah, it's tough to work with that bar. So it's like I need to work with that bar. And it's not like my pecs and everything aren't getting enough work. They're getting plenty of work if I do those twice a week after maxing. And the speed work works the chest. And then we're finishing off the whole upper chesting with these wide grip standing presses. These are wider grip. These are outside shoulder width, and my shoulders are wider than normal. And those of you who have met me or bumped into me at an event, they understand. They understand. So this is pretty wide grip. And again, it hits everything different. I feel a lot of upper pec, like pec minor. I feel a lot of side delt, all that stuff I don't always feel as much on the standing press. Like I normally feel the standing press in my front delts and triceps only. So I feel these other muscles, and now we're getting up decent. I mean, we went up another 5 pounds. I got my 3x10, but I don't come in and just beat the overhead press into the ground. You know, people will point out, as some people say, oh, it has a bad stimulus to fatigue ratio. Well, yeah, that's why we don't do a lot of sets, right? We don't come in and just grind it into the ground. We can do all the smaller lifts for that. 3x10, just like with the close grip, and 3x10 on this, that's plenty. We get a good training effect. We get practice at overhead pressing. We build all the muscles of the press, but we don't bury ourselves because 3 sets is not that bad. Plus, using that axle bar, it's tougher. It's more challenging. You got to get it around the face. It feels awkward. And I want to point that out. Some people have noticed, oh, well, your wrists are cocked back on that. Well, yeah, because I'm not using a straight bar. To my clients who think that they're allowed to do that with the straight bar, that's why I correct you. You keep those knuckles up and you squeeze the bar harder. You can't do that with this bar. Hey, it's just awkward. It's awkward and it's tough. But, again, I need all the extra just forearm training and arm training in general. At this point, I need to do anything and everything to just get my arms bigger. Now, I need a lot of it to be specific to my lifts. We need just bigger arms. And if stuff like this helps, it helps. I do all my curls. If people are curious, what am I doing for biceps? I'm doing very high reps with the axle bar almost every day. I'm just throwing them in randomly. Just come in and just do a few sets. Like I'll do them between box jumps, like when I did my plyos yesterday on GPP day, right? I did box jumps. I did basically a set to failure between every set of box jumps. And it started getting down to where I was running out of reps. Even with something I could do 40 with, I was hitting like 20 by the vinyl set. But yeah, I'm doing tons of just axle bar curls for very high reps. Trying to stay above 30 reps. Basically just using that empty bar. Then we did chain Skullcrushers. This first set was really, really rough. It looks awkward. It's bad. Got to stabilize it, trying to lock it. And I didn't get fast to the final 2. These first 3 sets, it's real slow. It's real slow. And I stayed pretty much in like the 13 to 15 rep range and I was hitting failure. But why the chains? We need the lockout strength. Notice that there's still weight at the bottom. You notice the chain is not fully unloaded. I could probably make them a hair longer to where they fully unload somewhat at the bottom. Or I may start hanging each chain I add after this a little lower down so that I keep some chain on the ground so that we'll get power all the way to the lockout. But I need that lockout to get work. You know, because when I do these with straight weight, I do feel a ton of tension at the bottom, right? And that's good. But my triceps are getting plenty of tension at the bottom and stuff with all my close grip pressing and rep work and stuff. I need this supplemental lift to really and truly help me get stronger on the top half in the top fourth. Because it is the case that people will say, well, a lockout on a bench is not really what a lot of guys think it is. They think mid-range where they stick there, that's their lockout. Well, in my case, look at where I stick. Have you guys not seen me struggle to re-rack a bench and get the last 3 inches that flew up through off the bottom? It is definitely tricep lockout. It's definitely a big factor for me. It's obviously not the only factor, because I mean I can't press what I would love to get long term even off the chest either. But the triceps, until they get stronger, we're going to be completely limited. That's why we build everything. There's a ton of shoulder work. I mean, I'm beating my shoulders into the ground all the way around. We're going to really build the delts up, the entire shoulder structure. I need to just make it big. And we are, and we'll be addressing that later. But the triceps, we need to be able to lock. And so I need the hardest part of the exercise to be the lockout. And for these, the chains are basically up. Here, I didn't really get a good view of it on camera. So I may even try to get a way to get the chains, a lot of the weight, a bit lower, so that we continue to have tension even through that last bit. But getting that lockout, I need it to be really hard through there. And I'm not as worried about tons of tension to the bottom. That's still getting worked. But that's also the hardest part of the exercise. The easiest on a tricep extension tends to be the lockout. And so we want to add weight there. We're adding accommodating resistance to make sure that I maximally develop those muscle fibers in the tricep that are used for that last 6 inches. Because that's what's going to make or break me now on my benching. That's what gets me. That's what limits how much weight I can do. It's usually the last anywhere from 2 to 6 inches. And it's like I get lifts that I get to there pretty good, and then I have to grind the lock. Now we start getting faster, though, with some practice. I got some practice in. It's less awkward. Then we got some quality sets the last two with a lot more speed. Speed against that heavy weight, speed against that lockout, and that's what we need. And I took all these pretty much to failure. But they felt good. Different stimulation. I'm going to run with chain work on this stuff for a while. It's what I need. And if I have to, I'll start even adding chains to my closed grip press work. Okay, we're going to do whatever we have to do to build that lockout. Then I just banged out 5 sets of the wide grip axle bar inverted rows. These weren't as bad today. The final one, it was tougher, but a lot of times I'm limited with grip on these. Some people will say, well, are you going to get full back development? My lats grow. My lats are going to grow no matter what. My lats grow from my speed deadlifts. They grow from everything, and we're doing a ton of work for them. So 10 sets of this every week, even though we could argue about grip and arms being a limit, not that worried. My lats will still grow. It's still inside of enough fatigue to get lat stimulation for me. And I can always add more volume for lats if I need to. If my lats start to lag, which, again, people who see my lats would laugh, in the off chance that they start to lag, we can just add more lat work. It's not a big deal, guys. But I need the grip training, and so I want anything I can do that will help with grip to go ahead and help with it right now for my deadlift. So I'm going to tend to do my inverted rows this way. And for people who are like, why do the inverted rows? Because I do an enormous amount of back work. Like, I just don't need the extra back involvement of Pendlay rows right now. Look how many good mornings and heavy good mornings I do, the amount of reverse hypers I do. I live on the reverse hyper. My off days, I end up doing a total of 15 sets of 30 per week. And then you guys see the heavy work on the main days with it. So we get a ton of back work. I don't need extra erector involvement. I just don't need it. I need to really just build that whole upper back and middle back. Heavier focus being on the upper back and shoulder girdle, will get us to our new movements. Now this, it's funny, it goes to show you that what we see on camera is not what we feel. People will say, why? I am doing this chest supported up against that bench, pushing my chest up against the bench to reduce cheating, and I'm trying to lock my arms. When I was doing these, I was doing my best to completely lock the elbows and do them almost in a T. And it still didn't happen. Now, we're still getting a good effect because we can't really cheat that much. With my press chest against there, chains make it hard, and then I've got a forward lean up against it. So it really removes my ability to do inertia. Now, a lot of people say, well, you are definitely getting traps and everything involved, and that's fine. We want the traps to grow from this. But what I'm trying to do is to make sure that my shoulder girdle gets hit at every angle possible. I need my entire delt and upper back and shoulder structure bigger and thicker. Okay, we have to have it for all my lifts. We have to have it. Now, some people would argue it almost looks like this is specializing in your overhead press. Well, it'll probably increase my overhead press, all this will. But it's going to increase my bench. It's going to increase my deadlift. It's going to increase my squat. Because this all ties in. And a lot of times people will say, well, how does this help with the squat? Building the whole upper back. All of this builds upper back. My upper back in general is a weakness. And people get this weird idea when they see the upper back weakness on that it's just the upper erectors. Not just the thoracic erectors, it's the whole trap. So we need to make sure that my entire shoulder structure and upper back structure gets a ton of growth. And again, this weight was challenging. This weight will probably get easier with practice. And I want to work better at getting the arms locked out. And again, I don't know why I can't. Might need to drop down to a next slightly lighter chain and see if I can. But I was literally trying to start with them locked at the bottom. And they're not. And that's okay. It's still definitely working side delt. Still working the upper trap. All right, we're hitting all these things. And really, it's hitting the entire delt. It's just with the emphasis being on the side delt. And that's why I'm leaning forward onto the thing a bit to try to get a little more side and a little less interior delt. My interior delt got plenty of work today, especially with the overhead pressing. You know, we did all that close gripping, and we did the overhead pressing. It got worked. And this works it too. So again, here I want more of the focus to be on the side delt upper trap. That's the goal. That's what we want. And I did 5 sets of these basically to failure. They were right in the 13 to 15 rep range. Right around 13 through 15 is where I was hitting failure on these. You know, failure is when it just sticks at the bottom and I tried it and my arm just doesn't come back up. Like, right? Doesn't mean that you cheat and grind and strain. Like, guys have this weird idea of what failure is. Because they read too many bodybuilding magazine stuff instead of just looking at the literature. Now this first set, a little more awkward. These are basically, again, notice the hand position is completely different. I'm gripping it more in a hammer rather than kind of an overhand grip. In a very large amount of lean. I'm on an incline that's about 30 degrees of incline maybe. You can't tell that from here, but pretty deep incline. Focus here is going to be rear delts, mid traps, infraspinatus, all that. But does it still hit the upper trap and the side delt tremendously? Yes. It's just that it's intended to be a rear delt exercise. All of these movements hit all 3 heads of the delts to some extent, though. All these movements, and when I say all these movements, I mean both of these raises and the overhead press, all work the trap also. All 3 of them work all 3 heads of the delts, all the trap. We need all that. The inverted rows work the rear delt, traps, infraspinatus, all of that also. So again, treating it in the way that a bodybuilder would, of picking these movements to really hammer everything and just kind of build the entire structure and leave no weak links. Because at this point, I can't afford those weak links. And yes, it's all really high reps, but you know what? This isn't unique to me. This is how serious strength athletes often train. This is how they train at Westside. Not saying they always pick these exact exercises, but they will come in and do 10 or 15 sets for their entire shoulder and upper back of high rep stuff. Because again, the value of it from a hypertrophy perspective. Now, I was trying to get these a little bit higher than this, but again, just fatigue in the limit. Again, I might have to drop the weight to see on these if I can get them a bit higher, but it's also limitations of sometimes my shoulder structure. But I might try next time with a little lighter weight and go the next chain down. Instead of these 17.1s, I might drop down to the 12s and see if I can get a little more range of motion. But I got one hell of a rear delt pump from it, so I was happy with it. So I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.